Hi, everybody. Welcome back to DisruptCRE Miami. We're here live at the James L. Knight Center, downtown Miami. I'd like to thank again our sponsor for Overtime Live, JLL Florida. And we have a couple members of the JLL team with us, so it's very exciting. We're here to talk the last panel of the day, Building Tech, On-Demand Concierge Services for today's tenants. Let's go down the row and introduce yourselves for the audience, please.
My name is Bradley Joyce. I'm co-founder and CEO of Skyrise.
Jason Gracilieri, founder, CEO of TurningArt.
Sean McNamara, General Manager at Southeast Financial Center for JLL.
And I'm Pushpa Gowda, Global Technology Presence Director, also with JLL.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. So you just came downstairs from a fantastic panel where we were talking about concierge services, which most people in real estate associate with residential buildings. I see it from where we've been traveling the country, and I see a lot of owners and managers. It's becoming a very competitive marketplace for offering these new services that are out there for their tenants. Bradley, why don't we start with telling us a little bit about what you guys do from a perspective of providing that type of thing, and we'll go on from there.
Yeah, so at Skyrise, we provide a platform that is kind of a plug-and-play community communication and concierge tool for the commercial office space. And, we instantly kind of connect all the tenants together and allow them to communicate with the property management or even the ownership in some cases. And so it really is about that connection, that transparency, and kind of building that environment. And, we're seeing some intense competition from buildings in downtown Dallas where we're based. A lot of buildings undergoing renovation, trying to attract new tenants, and concierge services is a big part of that.
Great. Jason, let's tell a little about what you do.
Sure. TurningArt is a turnkey artwork service for commercial, multifamily real estate, as well as office-based businesses. We provide fresh artwork from local artists across the entire country, and we take care of the entire service end-to-end, everything from design, curation, install, and rotation. We also have technology-enabled community voting features, and the idea is fundamentally to provide just a valuable service that today's office tenants are really looking for.
Great. John, let's go to you, and let's talk about the owners and managers that are implementing services like these. Why is this appealing for them? Why are they doing it?
I think it's twofold. One, from the ownership side, there's a value add component of it that when you implement these, it can reduce cost. It can have a accretive revenue value. And then from the tenant side, I think it's one of those things that tenants have come to expect. Obviously we're educating our tenants on what's out there and trying to promulgate programs that are being accepted in the workplace now that make their lives easier. Mobile platforms, workflow platforms that just overall make the tenant officing experience much better than it has been in the past. And I think the technology underpins that significantly.
Absolutely. Pushpa, please continue.
I was going to say, just because it is so important to both sides, tenant and landlords, that as a firm, we're actually doing a bunch of different kinds of research and prototyping around how can we make this better for our tenants and what can we offer them and how can we offer more value for the landlord. So we recognize it's important, and things like what Jason and Bradley are doing definitely contribute to that.
Yeah, and Pushpa, let's follow up with that. Are these services, are they becoming much more of a factor when a tenant is actually choosing one building versus another?
It seems to be. I mean, especially considering that, we're here in Miami too, right? We've got a lot of high-rise, high-end residential buildings where we get a lot of those as residents and tenants in the building, and from that perspective. So I think from the work perspective, we're starting to expect a lot of that as well. And I think, Jason, it was you that was bringing up, the gist of it was, play to your strengths. Don't spend time on things that somebody else can do for you or that technology can take care of for you. Let's focus on work and our families and what else really matters.
Right, Sean, I want you to follow up on that question too, about tenants, and is this becoming a deciding factor for them? Are they asking for these type of things, or are you adding more services to the offering?
Absolutely. I don't know that it's the deciding factor, but it's a deciding factor. And I think as tenants come in and they're looking at space decisions, they're clearly force ranking. And what's becoming more and more weighted is what type of service offering that you provide. It's not just economics anymore. Clearly, that may be the top and deciding factor is economics. View space is always important. What the office looks like. But I think when the brokers are walking their, the tenant reps are walking their clients around, one of the things they're doing is they're checking a box to go back and force rank buildings as to what types of services that they offer. Do they have facilities like conference rooms? Do they have fitness facilities? Do they have mobile building management solutions? I think all those play into pricing decisions on what they pay for rent and ultimately where they end up.
Right. I wanted to talk about, WeWork. WeWork, there's a lot of co-working companies out there. WeWork might be the most notable that, our audience would recognize. There's obviously a lot of, boutique ones that are in the individual cities. Do you think a company like WeWork or other, space providers, co-working spaces, have they made a big influence on other, bigger buildings and companies offering these type of services? Sure, Jason, go first, please.
We talked about this upstairs. I absolutely think so. I think you have, WeWork has almost started to set the standard for expectations of the workforce, of the creative and knowledge workforce. And it's not going to happen overnight, but I think as the companies that are within WeWork continue to grow and then ultimately move into more traditional, larger office space, the employee base of those organizations, they're going to look for the same level of service in their new location. And so I think it's eventually the standard is going to keep rising across the industry.
Okay. Yeah, Sean, please.
I was just going to follow up with that. JLL is clearly looking at WeWork as, what services are they offering? What can we, out of those services, offer to a multi-tenant environment? And, our ownership group, even JP Morgan, who is the asset manager for our building, they were encouraging us to go check out the new WeWork site down on Lincoln Road to see what does it look like? What are they doing differently that we could also be doing? So we definitely recognize the impact.
That's great. Anybody else want to follow up on that?
I think the whole WeWork sort of revolution, co-working as a general sort of movement, has caused a lot of feathers to be ruffled, but also a lot of people looking at it and say, man, we really have to adapt and adjust to what's kind of happening out there sort of in the marketplace today. And we talk to a lot of landlords at Skyrise, and we hear sort of a lot of fear based on what WeWork is doing. And landlords asking themselves, like, how are we going to compete with the WeWorks of the world when a company maybe they're not the best fit for us today because they're only a couple employees, but in WeWork, you can start out a couple employees and then pretty soon you're 10, 15, 20 employees, but still you can exist within the WeWork environment. And so, these landlords, these more traditional landlords, are looking at how do we adjust our offering to attract these companies and keep them in our buildings. And I think kind of WeWork put out a call, and now it's up to these landlords to respond. And kind of one of the things that we do at Skyrise is help them kind of provide some of that sort of communication that is sort of inherent in WeWork, but in a more traditional setting.
Right.
I'd follow one thing on that is I think, WeWork's not for everyone. And I think, but what they've shown is that there's some really great value they're providing. But I think there's a lot of companies out there who would love a different, more traditional space where they can have a little bit more privacy, a little bit more control of their environment, but at the same time get the same level of benefits and service. So I think WeWork is almost providing, if you will, like a roadmap for other commercial real estate owners and operators as to kind of where, the path to win in the future.
Right. I want to talk to you two here, and then we'll get to you two on kind of the same but different question. Speaking of those landlords, owners, from your perspective of people offering these services, have you seen this? Has it been easier to approach and get business done, especially as time goes on?
Yeah, so I think our experience has been so far that the landlords and the owners, they recognize that they need to have these types of services. They recognize that the workplace is changing, the environment is changing, the workforce is changing. We didn't really talk about it much upstairs, but 2020, 75% of the workforce is going to be the millennial generation, and so there's all these adjustments that they need to make. Now, our experience has been that there's still a lot of fear on the part of the landlords. Just commercial real estate in general has been very slow to adopt drastic changes, and sort of the pace of innovation now is very intense. And so there is sort of a barrier, there is some fear, but part of our job is to allay that, show that there's all these benefits and they outweigh those potential risks, and so people are starting to to attract that.
That's great. We can tell there's a couple on our panel now, so that's fantastic. And Jason, what's your experience so far in dealing with same people?
Yeah, what I would add that it's not, by no means is it, did a light switch go off and everybody's ready to do it and charge forward, and this is just kind of extend off what Sean had said earlier, you're not gonna, services aren't going to, if you're offering, if the decision is between $60 square foot and $30 square foot, services aren't going to make the difference, right? It's still, economics still play a huge role. But when you're talking about in-class space and comparable square footage cost, and everything else being comparable, I think the forward-thinking early adopters, the people who are looking at the market and they want to be out ahead, they're the ones who are leading the charge right now. And ultimately, there's going to be a pickup in the market, and it's going to be something that today you differentiate, and then ultimately it's going to be something you need to do to compete.
Yeah, and it's not a coincidence that we do have two very progressive people in a company like JLL, Sean, as you mentioned, that the building that you work on, they're encouraging you to go out and look at these things. So that's great. From your side, the JLL side, have you seen, maybe a lack of a better term, an explosion of these type of on-demand concierge services that you're now getting contacted for to be putting into your building? Right? Is that happening? Do you see more of that happening, or are we still at a slower pace with that?
No, I think absolutely. I mean, look, our tenants are very, very smart. They go out in the marketplace. They see things that are offered at other sites. Maybe they have colleagues that work at WeWorks, and we're not bombarded by that type, because usually we're more forward thinking, that we're trying to implement things in advance of that they already need, and we may already have what they've seen out in the marketplace, but they're smart, they're adaptive, and as Bradley had said, look, it's changing. The workplaces, the way they work, what we're seeing a lot of is consolidation of space, people getting smarter about the way they use their space, lower energy costs in space, all those types of things that people like WeWorks have already adapted have adopted. So I mean, we're constantly being pressured by those types of asks, but we like to think we're more out in front of those before they ask.
Right. That's very good.
I think it's to piggyback on what Sean was saying, I think that for those that are ahead of the game on the landlord and property management side and leasing side, adopting things now only makes your life easier, right? From all around, because your tenants are going to be happier, your landlords are going to be happier, and your life is easier that way too. From a tenant's perspective, especially, like I'm in a hotel almost once a week, and I have certain expectations from city to city, chain to chain, and I think for tenants it's starting to be the same thing, right? We talked about on the residential side, the hospitality side, and of course, like commercial real estate's always one of the last industries to catch up. I think we're finally there, but we're still in the early adoption phase where people who get it can make a difference now.
Well, that's a great segue into, let me stay with you, Pushpa. What gets you excited about, the building of the future from the commercial side, right? I mean, you're traveling all over the place, you're all over the world seeing these things. Maybe even you've seen some of these things installed around other places. So what gets you excited?
One, this is going to sound awful, but one is never having to talk to anybody. Like being able to do everything on an app or online and not having to pick up the phone. Because anything that's on my list that I have to actually call someone, it gets pushed further and further down, even if it's a 30-second kind of thing, right? And we were talking earlier about how if someone doesn't have a mechanism to be able to report something or find out information, you become disgruntled, and the landlord or property management doesn't even know that's an issue. They don't even know that's a knock against you. So for me, it's that whole everything's just taken care of, and if it's not, I can easily take care of it myself.
Right. Sean, what about you? Same question. What gets you, maybe some of these things you've already installed, some things you're looking at right now. What gets you excited about some of these things you're able to offer?
Yeah, I think, just to underscore that, we always have to do the blocking and tackling. Look, the tenants want the air on, they want the lights on, they want the elevators to work. They want their things fixed when they want it fixed. And we have to execute on that, and we have to execute on it perfectly. Beyond that, though, there are some trick plays beyond the blocking and tackling that I think that we can help make the customer experience better. And I like things like we were talking about upstairs, where we integrate like a license plate recognition technology instead of the tenant having to pull their card out every time, and they pull up to the gate. The gate opens without them having to do anything, and then it recognizes who they are by their access card. Says, "Have a good evening, Mr. McNamara," and they pull out. I like things where we can save tenants money on their build when they're coming in and building TI out. And as I look to the future, I see more and more buildings offering things that are integrated into their platform that make that easier, where there's a cost savings, where the fiber's already in the building and they can just pull straight from that. If we don't start offering those types of things, our competitors will. And we need to be out in front of that. So we are looking at not only the blocking and tackling, but the type of trick plays that other people are going to start doing.
Jason and Bradley, I want you guys to finish this sentence for me. The best type of manager owner that understands my service is?
Yeah, I think the best type of manager owner that understands my service is somebody who's looking 5 to 10 years out and is seeing some of the trends early, right? It's easy to kind of understand like what's happening in your building today, but you gotta think about the future. And I think the people that are really responding well to kind of what we're offering are the people who really are thinking about the future in their building.
That's great.
Bradley, I totally thought you were going to say that the ideal landlord or investor is one that buys your app.
Well, Jason's up next, so we'll wait on it.
What I would say is I think it's fundamentally just the practical business person. I think ultimately it's, and part of that maybe just a little bit of education about helping them fully understand what we're talking about here, but I think the future is set. This is the direction it's going. And if you want to ultimately, it's still ultimately about economic value. It's these services are going to provide you either with cost savings or with extended value, lower churn rates, right? It's ultimately, otherwise, there's no reason to do them otherwise, right? There ultimately has to be an economic value that comes from it, and the well-designed services are going to provide that.
Okay, last question for everybody. What's the timetable for a wide adoption? Let's just stay with office buildings, right? I mean, there's so many different classes and property types. Let's just say, your office building, class A, B, that you see in almost every metropolitan city skyscraper. How soon will we see that all of these buildings are going to be offering these type of amenities? Dry cleaning, Skyrise app, TurningArt, all these things.
I have a feeling that we're due to come up at in the cycle of things, right? We're due for a downturn in a couple of years, and then there'll be a lot of, empty space and those kinds of things, and people will need more ways to attract tenants and not just low prices. So I bet you, and technology will become cheaper and cheaper too, right? So all these kinds of services, I bet, will probably become much more prevalent and widespread at that time.
Sean?
That's such a tough question, how quickly, because it really is a function of also, Bradley mentioned and Jason had alluded to it, the people that get this technology integrated into these buildings are really the property managers. And it's a function of where are they in the workforce? Are they afraid of the technology? Is this something that they feel they have to change their skill sets to do? If they're not bringing it to the ownership's attention that it's a problem, the ownership really relies on the property management and the full service real estate companies to come to them with these sort of innovative approaches. So I think it's a function of how we can inject that into the culture of the places like JLL, which I think we're very forward thinking. We're constantly going in that direction. I think if we're talking about our organization, I think you're talking about our organization. I think it's going to be faster because we are constantly bringing those types. I can't speak for my competitors, but I know that we are forward thinking and we are pushing those types of technologies.
And you can tell, I just want to add, you can tell because you guys are landing those type of buildings across the country and around the globe. So yes, it speaks to that, absolutely. Yeah, Jason. How soon will every building and company have TurningArt as a service?
3 years, 6 months, 2 weeks, and 1 day. It's a tough question to answer, but it picks up for us. Here's a good example. When we get into a building with a property owner who is a portfolio owner, we have very quick follow-on. And that's because they're finally able to just see it in action, they get it, and they realize that, wow, this is to the question about property managers, it's they're busy, right? There's just a lot of things that they have to take care of. And so when you can finally trust a solution where it literally is pick up the phone, make a call, and it's solved, it's done, right? So there's just I think a bit more education. So I don't know a hard timeline, but we're seeing adoption pick up quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely happening now all over the place. I mean, even in a fairly conservative city like Dallas, there's a lot of companies, a lot of buildings that are starting to adopt this stuff pretty quickly. You know, certainly there's always the kind of people who want things to stay the way they are, you know, so you're going to be overcoming those things over time. But it's definitely happening now, and we're seeing a lot of adoption of these different kind of technologies. And I think, too, a big part of that is there's a lot of people coming into these decision-making positions that are comfortable with technology.
That's a big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we sat down with an asset manager who literally took over like 3 or 4 million square feet that he's managing specifically, and he started in that position when he was like 26 or 27, you know, and he's like 31 now or something like that. So, you know, really young guy, has the decision-making power to implement stuff, and he's looking at all these technologies, and I think that's going to be a big driver of adoption.
Right. That's great. Well, you guys, thank you so much. This has been the Tech Tools Concierge panel. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you all soon.